Get out." The word landed harder than the suitcase hitting the marble floor. Amara didn't move at first. She stood in the living room she had cleaned every morning for 11 years, her hands hanging loosely at her sides, her ears ringing as if the walls themselves had shouted at her. Daniel didn't look at her. He adjusted his suit cuff instead, smooth and precise, like this was just another business meeting he needed to finish before lunch. "I said, get out," he repeated, calmer this time. "You heard me." Behind him, a woman stood barefoot on the stairs. Young, beautiful, wearing Amara's silk robe. The robe Amara had bought on their 5th anniversary, when she still believed effort mattered. "So, this is real," Amara said quietly. Her voice didn't shake. That surprised even her. Daniel exhaled like a man exhausted by inconvenience. "Don't do this. Don't make it dramatic." The woman on the stairs smiled faintly, her hand resting on the banister as if she already owned the house. "I'm not," Amara replied. "I just want to understand when my marriage ended." Daniel finally looked at her then. His eyes were cold, final. "It ended a long time ago. You just refused to notice." Amara nodded once. That hurt more than shouting would have. "You packed my things?" she asked. "They're right there," he said, gesturing toward the suitcase. "Take what you need. Leave the rest." "What about the house?" she asked. "My name is on the—" Daniel cut her off. "Not anymore." He reached into his jacket and placed a folded document on the table between them. Divorce papers. Signed, filed, completed. "You didn't even wait," she said. "There was no reason to," he replied. "I've moved on. You should too." The woman descended the stairs slowly now, deliberate, predatory. "Daniel," she said sweetly, "the photographer will be here soon. We should get ready." Photographer. The word echoed. Amara turned toward her. "Photographer?" Daniel answered instead. "We're getting married today." The room tilted. "Today?" Amara repeated. The woman smiled wider. Surprise. Amara looked around the room. The couch where she had slept beside him through illness. The window she'd watched rain through while waiting for him to come home late. The kitchen where she'd cooked meals he barely noticed. All of it was already gone. She reached for the suitcase handle. "That's it?" Daniel asked. "You're not going to beg, cry?" Amara met his gaze. "No," she said. "I won't give you that." For the first time, something flickered behind his eyes. Annoyance. She turned toward the door. As she stepped outside, the door closed behind her with a final click. The lock turned. Amara stood on the porch, suitcase at her feet, robeless, homeless, married no longer. Inside, laughter drifted through the glass. Across the street, a black sedan idled quietly. A man sat in the back seat, watching the house with careful eyes. He had arrived early for a meeting nearby, and he had just seen everything. The rain started as Amara dragged the suitcase down the street. Not heavy, not dramatic, just enough to soak her shoes. Her phone buzzed once. A message from Daniel. "Don't come back. The locks are changed." She didn't reply. She walked. Every step pulled at her chest, but she refused to let herself run. Running felt like begging. She found shelter under a bus stop awning and sat on the bench, her suitcase between her knees. People passed. No one looked twice. She opened her phone and scrolled through her contacts. Her sister's number hovered under her thumb. She didn't press it. Instead, she opened her banking app. the balance refreshed. Her breath stalled. The account was empty. Not low. Empty. She closed the app, opened it again. Still empty. Her joint account with Daniel was gone. Her savings, her safety, all of it. Amara leaned back against the cold metal bench and closed her eyes. She did not cry. She did not scream. She breathed, slow, controlled. "I'll survive," she whispered. "I always do." Across town, the man from the black sedan sat in a private office overlooking the city. His name was Victor Hale. Most people knew the name. They just didn't know the face. He replayed the memory in his mind. The woman standing still. The man signing her life away without looking at her. The mistress smiling. Victor leaned back in his chair. "Find her," he said into his phone. A pause. "Yes," he added calmly, "the woman he threw out." That night, Amara slept on a couch in a friend's one-bedroom apartment. The friend didn't ask questions. Amara didn't volunteer answers. The next morning, she woke early and left before anyone else stirred. She stood in the bathroom, brushing her teeth, staring at her reflection. Her eyes were tired, but they were steady. She found work cleaning offices downtown. Temporary. Low pay, no questions asked. She worked silently, efficiently, never complained. Her phone stayed quiet. Daniel didn't call. The wedding photos appeared online that afternoon. She didn't look at them. 2 weeks passed, then 3. The couch became unbearable. She moved into a rented room with thin walls and no lock on the door. At night, she lay awake listening to strangers breathe. She took extra shifts, skipped meals, kept moving. Across the city, Victor Hale read every update. Employment records, rental agreements, bank statements. "She hasn't asked for help," his assistant noted. Victor nodded. "That's why this matters." Daniel's marriage was already cracking. The woman he married loved money more than patience. She complained, spent, demanded. Daniel worked longer hours, ignored whispers, ignored questions, ignored the way people suddenly stopped trusting him. Then one morning, a file landed on Victor Hale's desk. Property records, company ownerships, hidden transfers. Victor smiled faintly. "Good," he said. "Now we wait." Amara stood in a hotel lobby, mop in hand, when a voice behind her said calmly, "Excuse me, are you Amara?" She turned, and for the first time since she was thrown out, someone looked at her like she mattered. Amara tightened her grip on the mop handle. "Yes," she said cautiously. "That's me." The man standing in front of her looked out of place for the service corridor of a mid-range hotel. His suit was simple but expensive, the kind that didn't need logos to announce its worth. His posture was relaxed, but his eyes were alert, measuring, not judging. "My name is Victor," he said. "I oversee some properties in the city. I've been told you do excellent work." Amara blinked. "I just started here last week." Victor smiled faintly. "That's usually when people show who they really are." She didn't know how to respond to that, so she didn't. "I won't take much of your time," he continued. "I wanted to ask if you'd be open to a different role. Same building. Better hours." Her first instinct was suspicion. "I don't have qualifications," she said carefully. Victor met her gaze. "You have composure. That's rarer." She hesitated. "I can't afford to lose this job," she said. "You won't," Victor replied. You'll gain one. A supervisor appeared at the end of the hall, glancing nervously between them. Victor turned slightly. I'll let you think about it. You'll find my card at the front desk. He walked away without waiting for an answer. Amara stared after him, unsettled. That night, she lay on her narrow bed, staring at the ceiling. She didn't trust sudden kindness. She trusted effort. Still, the card sat on the table beside her. Victor Hale. No title, just a number. She didn't call. Daniel noticed the shift before anyone told him. Meetings were shorter, emails colder, his requests delayed. At first he blamed incompetence, then he blamed jealousy. What's going on? He demanded during a board call. A silence followed. Then someone cleared their throat. We're reassessing certain partnerships. Based on what? Daniel snapped. Due diligence, came the calm reply. The call ended early. His wife waved him off from the kitchen island, scrolling on her phone. You're being paranoid. Daniel didn't respond. That night, he searched his name online. Nothing bad, nothing good either. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that comes before something breaks. Amara's life didn't change overnight. She took the offered position 2 weeks later. Administrative support, still cleaning, still invisible to most. But the pay was steadier. The hours humane. She started eating 3 meals again. Her hands stopped shaking. One afternoon, Victor appeared again, this time in the lobby cafe. Sit, he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. She did. He slid a folder toward her. Inside were documents, old ones, property deeds, bank transfers. Her mother's maiden name appeared on the first page. Amara's breath caught. My father, Victor said quietly. You never met him. She looked up sharply. He died 3 years ago. Victor continued. Left assets, considerable ones. They were mishandled. Amara's mouth went dry. By who? Victor didn't answer immediately. Your husband knew, he said instead. The room seemed to tilt. No, she whispered. He would have. He did, Victor said gently. And he ensured you never found out. Her hands trembled as she flipped through the pages. Signatures, dates, Daniel's name, again and again and again. She closed the folder for a long moment. She said nothing. Then, I don't want revenge. Victor studied her. I didn't think you would. I just want the truth, she said, out in the open. Victor nodded once. Then we'll do this properly. Daniel's wife packed her bags 2 months later. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply said, I didn't sign up for decline. She left the ring on the counter. That same week, Daniel was removed as CEO, pending investigation. He sat alone in his office long after everyone else left, staring at the city lights. His phone buzzed. An unknown number. You should have let her walk away with dignity. He typed back furiously. Who is this? No reply. Amara stood in a courtroom wearing a simple navy dress. No jewelry, no makeup. Just herself. Daniel sat across the aisle, pale, hollow-eyed. When their eyes met, something flickered across his face. Recognition. Fear. The judge read the findings calmly. Fraud, withholding inheritance. Breach of trust. Daniel's lawyer whispered urgently. It didn't matter. The evidence spoke louder than any defense. Amara was called to the stand. She walked slowly, steadily. She didn't look at Daniel as she spoke. She spoke to the room. "I didn't know," she said. "And I trusted him." Her voice didn't break. The judge nodded. The ruling came down like a door closing. Assets restored. Accounts returned. Daniel slumped back in his chair, not angry, not defiant, empty. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered. Questions flew. Amara said nothing. Victor stood beside her, shielding her from cameras without touching her. As they reached the car, Daniel's voice cut through the noise. "Amara." She turned. He stood alone on the steps, smaller than she remembered. "I never thought you'd survive without me," he said hoarsely. She looked at him for a long moment. "I did," she said quietly. "That's what scares you." She turned away. The car door closed. That evening, Amara returned to the house she had been thrown out of, not to reclaim it, but to face it on her own terms. The house looked smaller than Amara remembered. Not physically. Its walls still stood tall. Its gates still gleamed. But the weight it once held over her was gone. She parked across the street and sat in the car for a moment, hands resting in her lap. This was where she had learned how quietly someone could erase you. She stepped out and walked up the path. The front door opened before she knocked. Daniel stood there. No suit this time. No authority in his posture. Just a man clinging to a place that no longer belonged to him. "I knew you'd come," he said. "I didn't," Amara replied. "But I realized something on the way." He stepped aside instinctively, letting her in. The house smelled different. New perfume, no warmth. "You don't have to do this," Daniel said, following her into the living room. "The court ruling, everything's already settled." "I'm not here for the house," she said, "or the money." He stopped walking. "Then why, Amara?" Turned to face him. "I'm here to return something." She reached into her bag and pulled out a thin folder. She placed it on the table. Daniel stared at it. "What is that?" "Your wedding invitation," she said. "The one you sent my sister by mistake." His jaw tightened. "I wanted you to know," she continued calmly, "that I saw it. I read it. I saw the date. And I want you to know something else." She stepped closer. "I never wished you harm. I just stopped protecting your lies." Daniel swallowed. "You think you're better than me now?" he said bitterly. Amara shook her head. "No, I think I'm free." A long silence stretched between them. "I loved you," he said finally, "in my way." She nodded once. "I know. That's why it took me so long to leave." She walked toward the door. Daniel's voice cracked. "What am I supposed to do now?" Amara paused, her hand on the handle. "You'll do what I did," she said without turning around. "You'll survive the truth." She left. The door closed behind her. This time she didn't hear laughter, only quiet. Weeks passed. Amara moved into a modest apartment overlooking the river. Not extravagant, not symbolic, just peaceful. She returned to school part-time, studying management, the same way she had once studied Daniel's moods, carefully, patiently, with intention. Victor checked in occasionally, never hovering, never claiming credit. One afternoon they sat on a park bench watching the city move. "You could take over the foundation fully," he said. "Your name carries weight now." Amara smiled faintly. I don't want to be powerful. Victor glanced at her. I want to be unafraid, she finished. He nodded. That's rarer. Daniel's fall wasn't loud. No headlines, no dramatic arrests, just a slow disappearance. Consulting offers dried up. Friends stopped calling. The woman he married filed for annulment. He moved into a smaller place, across town. Sometimes, late at night, he drove past the river and parked. He never got out. 1 year later, Amara stood in front of a small group of women at a community center. Some were divorced, some displaced, some still figuring out how to stand. She didn't tell them her whole story. She didn't need to. She simply said, "You don't need permission to survive betrayal. You don't need approval to rebuild." A woman in the back wiped her eyes. Afterward, as Amara packed her bag, a familiar voice spoke behind her. "You look well." She turned. Daniel stood there, thinner, older. "I heard you speak," he said. "You've helped a lot of people." She nodded politely. "I wanted to say I'm sorry," he added. "Not for losing you, for thinking you'd disappear." Amara studied him for a long moment. "I didn't disappear," she said gently. "I arrived." She walked past him. He didn't follow. That night, Amara stood on her balcony, city lights reflecting in the water below. Her phone buzzed. A message from her sister. "I'm proud of you." She smiled. Not wide, not triumphant, just steady. Somewhere across the city, Daniel sat alone with the truth he had tried to bury. And Amara? She slept peacefully, because delayed justice doesn't shout. It waits, and when it comes, it doesn't ask for revenge. It simply restores what was always there. Dignity. If this story moved you, like and subscribe for more hidden truth stories.